Let's get the view now from an infectious disease expert. Dr. Benjamin Ko joins us tonight on The Final Word. Dr. Ko, thank you so much for joining us. Isn't this a huge risk, Dr. Ko, not requiring incoming travelers from overseas to have themselves tested as long as they have tested negative from their point of origin?
Yes, that's correct. We need to remember that many of these tests that are being done, whether it is a PCR or whether it is the antigen test, are point-of-care tests, which means that they only tell you the results for that particular day. Because you can be negative today and you can be positive tomorrow.
Yes.
We also know for a fact that most of the patients that are asymptomatic or do not have symptoms have a very low chance of being positive for many of these tests. These are not perfect tests. We still have to have one that absolutely tells you that if you are negative, then you are negative, and
Right.
if you're positive, then
But case in
there
point,
is no contamination.
Doctor, Cardinal Tagle tested negative when he left the Vatican, and when he
Yeah.
arrived in Manila, he tested positive.
Yeah, but he was asymptomatic. So I have a feeling, and this is personal, I have a feeling that some of the tests may even end up as false positive tests. But it's good that, Cardinal Tagle was, because it was a very short interval. I mean, you get on a plane and it's impossible that you turn out positive the following day because you got it on the plane. We all know for a fact that if you don't have symptoms, it will take you a couple of days when you don't have symptoms before you even turn out positive for a PCR.
Doctor, you mentioned about the RT-PCR and the antigen test in your previous answer. Right now, because the RT-PCR is still used as a gold standard when flying to other cities, let's say Boracay, or for arriving passengers. In your view, is it time for the antigen test approved by the US FDA be used side by side with PCR for testing?
Well, on a personal note, I feel that the antigen test and the PCR, as you mentioned, can be used on a side-by-side note because some patients can test positive for PCR and then test negative for antigen. And we know that if you are positive for PCR, you are infected. But the antigen test is highly useful if you're looking at viral load. So that means that if you have symptoms and you have an infection on the first couple of days or a day before or even a few days after your symptoms appear, the antigen test will be very reliable because that's when you see the viral load very high and you see the virus replicating at that pace.
And we just reported that the mayors have green-lighted 3 more recommendations to, further open up the economy. And today, the Department of Health has mentioned and reported that we already have close to 360,000 infection. And the daily rate now continues to rise, doctor, in the thousands. Is it really advisable at this point to further open up the economy with the caseload still very high?
Well, I don't know how to answer that in a way wherein I can make it understandable, but let me try. And I know we have very limited time, so I'll try to do it as quickly as possible. In the first place, we have not really actually, the total number of cases have not actually declined. We've plateaued. We've plateaued at 2,500, just the same way as Indonesia has plateaued at 4,500. So we've been at this number for quite some time. But if you look at the local data, around 30% of them are not within the 14-day period, or otherwise what we call recent data, which means that of the 2,000 plus that get reported daily, only like 1,800 or at least 2,000 or even 1,500 are actually recent cases. So the only reason why the numbers look like they're still a lot, it's because because we still have a lot of backlog, well, quote unquote, backlog data, especially the NCR, where you're seeing people that have been infected in that were positive in March still being reported in October. And then there I go to what the WHO is saying. There are low, mid, high, and very high countries with COVID cases. And that classification is a 7-day running period, which means that every 7 days they assess which countries are low, which countries are mid, which countries are high, and so on and so forth. And to wrap it up, like the Philippines, for example, had 18,000 cases only last week. And we have 110 million people. So that means we have 163 cases per million in the past week. If you compare us to France, France, for example, has had 178,000 cases in the last week. They have 65 million people, and they have 2,741 per million. Look at the big difference. So the
Right.
WHO classification of low, which means less than 101, mid, which means 101 to 500, and we fall within it because that means we have had only 163 cases per million in the last week.
So this
And
is
then,
quite.
of course, France will fall into the very high, which is more than 1,000 cases per million.
So over the past couple of months, Doctor, we all have been wearing face masks and face
Yep.
shields.
Yeah.
Is this really working?
Well, I guess it's going to help. It's just that the face shields has always been my pet peeve because I hate it when people keep putting it up on their head and using it as a headband, or that they put it on their neck, because it's
Yes.
really difficult to or use it as a headgear when it rains. And I think the masking alone is very helpful. All of these strategies are actually useful. And I think we need to teach people how to use it correctly, especially the face shields, where they need to clean it as well. Okay? Of course, sometimes people don't really focus on how to properly use all of these personal protective equipments.
And briefly, before we let you go, should
Yeah.
we remain, particularly NCR, in general community quarantine until the end of the year?
That depends on the numbers. But we've been doing really, really, really well. I track the cases every day, and I've broken it down actually already to per capita, which gives you better information on which of the different cities are actually more. Well, all of these restrictions are more useful in these various cities, and um, if you ask me, like, with NCR has been really doing very well in the past few weeks.
Because Secretary
Personally,
Duque has said it during the president's
yeah, he's right.
speech to the nation that Metro Manila's cases are on the decline. And today alone, there were just more than 700 cases out of the 2,000 cases reported.
There were only 555. The 796 he was mentioning included all of those that came from September, August, July, and all the way back to March. So if you really count it by day, the last 14 days, we've really had only 555.
You have a
The
more accurate account, Doctor,
Well,
compared
it's
to
their data.
Secretary
It's
Duque.
actually their data. I blog about their data. So I have the exact numbers that the DOH has. But Secretary Duque is correct. The numbers are actually on a massive decline, and I'd like to see it that way. The National Capital Region is one of the most dense cities in the world. It is the 15th densest city in the world, if there's such a word as densest. But it's a 15th dense city in the world. And with 13 million people residing here on a 600 square kilometer area, we are about 25,000 people per square kilometer. So perhaps up to December 31, yeah, why not? I mean, we've lived with this already. What's a few more months than wasting the last 7 months? That's my point.
That's true. Thank you so much for your opinions and insights on this issue. Dr. Benjamin Ko, an infectious disease expert.